Welcome to Book Lounge by Libby. I'm Joe, and I am so happy you're here. I love the chance to hear from you, so if you've got questions, comments, or suggestions for future episodes, send me an email, bookloungebylibby@overdrive.com. But without further delay, let's get into today's video. I want to dive into something with one of my genre experts. Meara is here, and Meara loves witchy books. So today, I'm going to interrogate her on what got her into the space, how she breaks down her favorite subgenres, tropes she loves, and maybe some recommended reads along the way. Meara, hi, how are you?
I'm so good. I've never been more excited for an episode.
This one was made for you. Literally, it only exists because you are here and want to do it.
Because I have asked you to do it so many times.
And I'll say yes. I'm a pretty easy guy. Like you say, hey, would you consider this? And I've probably already said yes before you finish the pitch. So
Perfect.
So let's fall under the spell, so to speak. Starting from the beginning, do you remember how you first got into witchy books?
Oh my God. My entire life. Actually, you know what? I feel like the start of my witchy book lifestyle started with fairy tales. I think I've talked a lot about how a lot of my literary love started with fairy tales. But very specifically, Jane Yolen had a book that is Not One Damsel in Distress. And it is a collection of fairy tales from around the world about girls and them saving the day. And it just has like overall witchy vibes. My favorite story in it, I can't remember the name off my top of my head, but it's about a girl who this like sorcerer keeps marrying her sisters and then they disappear. And then she goes, finds out that he like chopped up their bodies. She puts them back together. They chop up the guy and live happily ever after. And I feel like that was really my like, oh, women being powerful with supernatural elements. Like that is my like origin story. I also really loved the author, I don't know if it's pronounced Avi or Avi, A-V-I.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He had a book, Midnight Magic, which not a girl, main character's a boy, but just like that was the first time I asked for a tarot book or tarot cards. I was told no.
Even being in Louisiana?
Being 7 years old in Louisiana.
7 years old, fair.
I was told no tarot cards. When I turned 18 and I got my own tarot cards, then we moved on.
Different story. Different story.
But that was a resentment in my heart for a long time.
And you know what? I can't blame you. So would you say like the nature of where you grew up informed your love of like being in the South, being specifically in such a witchy place?
Yeah.
Did that have anything to do with it? Or what drew you in?
I think I would have been like this no matter what.
Didn't matter where on the map you were.
My parents are were very into Arthurian legend. So all of my dogs growing up were named after different knights of the Round Table. And we had a girl dog. Her name was Morgan Le Fay. So that just like the Celtic roots of it all, I feel like familially influenced. And like my parents are like Renaissance festival people. And I think that and witches all go together. Do I think that modern day contemporary witch concept definitely has influenced that or like influenced me into other kinds of witches? Yes. But there's definitely like an acceptance and like interest in magic there. I think the New Orleans of it all had to have influenced it.
Sure.
And then I also think, you know, those jokes where it's like every girl had her like middle school historical hyperfixation.
Uh-huh.
I didn't so much have like, I wasn't like Triangle Shirtwaist Factory, I know everything about it, or Titanic. I was never like that. I was more just like witches, like
yes,
witches throughout history. And
it was the whole timeline.
Women get power and then be called witches. Like that was just like the whole thing.
That makes a lot of sense. And like leading into those first reads you mentioned, were you seeking out witches or did a book find you? Like, was there something that went like, this was the first one and it happened across my lap? Or from your parents' influences of knowing those kind of stories of the Round Table and I mean, gosh, I guess even like the Magic Tree House, how it's impacted all of us, like that had a whole huge Arthurian.
You want to know a secret?
You
I don't know if I've ever read a single one.
It's because I'm a grandpa. It's fine.
No, it was like of the zeitgeist, But I was reading Bailey School Kids, and I had my
Okay, fair.
allegiances. I did not do Boxcar Children. I did not do Babysitter's Club. I did not do Magic Tree House. It was Bailey School Kids. It was Witches Don't Coach Soccer or whatever it was. Like
Okay, so valid. Okay.
Giants Don't Go Snowboarding.
You were on brand. You had your store of choice.
I wanted my low fantasy. I did not, or I guess I wanted magical realism. I didn't
Yes.
want time travel.
That's fair. Yeah. It's funny, all the time travel I read then that I don't read now. It's like, I got it, young. I'm good.
But to answer your question, I like don't have a memory of like specifically going to the library and being like, I am going to pick out a book about witch. Like I remember like I was a big Roald Dahl kid,
Sure.
as many of us were. So there was like the Twitches and Matilda, and like there was still like magical. I mean, like he had like the BFG. Like there was
Right.
magical elements in all of his books. I think I definitely gravitated towards things that just like had this
That
this
fall in that
magical
magical
element.
realism. Yeah.
You want to know another secret though? I've
Of
never read Harry
course.
Potter.
Well, didn't you come out on top of that one?
Didn't I win that one?
Well, don't start now.
I tried. I would get like one chapter and be like, this is boring and close it. So I have a really high threshold when it comes to magic in literature.
Yeah, in what you're willing to accept and take on, for
Yeah,
sure.
see, there's a high bar to clear.
But that's okay. I think there is something inherent when we look at the books that we chose as a kid and to how they still impact what we choose today. And I think, especially with thinking of you at 7 or 8 years old saying, I want my first tarot deck, do you think that once you had developed that love of witches and books and magical stories, that it ever connected to anything outside of reading? Were there aesthetics you were like going for, or was it just the escapism of there is no world like this?
Yeah. Well, I was never goth. I did have
Sure.
an emo phase, as someone that was 12 years old in 2007 would do.
I was going to say, we were of the time, so.
Of the times. I feel like it's been like phases. There's like so many photos of me as a little kid in like a long brown skirt with like a flowy green shirt, but also I was like playing soccer. So like,
Yeah,
the duality of childhood where like
absolutely.
aesthetics aren't like as much of a thing. I'm like trying to think if there's anything where I was like,
Well, I think of
I
like,
mean, I was a witch for Halloween like 5 years in a row.
sure.
It was
I
like
just
witch
even
or
think of
princess.
our time growing up, like the sun and the moon decals on the walls and like the things like that, where, like, were there even aesthetics that you saw in pop culture that made you go, oh, I want more of that? Or was it was truly just the love of the game?
I feel like it was just like the love of the game. Like I truly didn't have like a visual aesthetic that I gravitated to as a child.
Yeah.
I did have a friend who lived down the street. Her family had a big, beautiful, magical garden. Like they
Yeah.
grew, it was over an acre, I want to say, of
Oh, wow.
yard. And so much of it was garden. And we loved to go just like hang out in the garden and pretend to be witches. And we would pick vegetables that they grew there and like make our own soups.
Aw.
So we definitely like lived as witchily as we could when we would play in her backyard. But like I think part of the thing that's always gravitated me to witches, and like kind of as part of my like critique of the genre and why I explore it so much, is that
Yes.
there's this like almost like Sabrina cliche of like that's what witchcraft or like what witches look like. And I feel like I'm really drawn to like the natural connection, like just the like the being on the vibe with the universe and earth and nature.
The more like practical magic of it rather than, like it's more of a sense memory and like a reality of interconnectedness rather than.
Less like hocus pocus.
Yes.
Less hocus pocus, more practical magic.
I feel that.
And I feel like a lot of witch media gets very cutesy with it in a way that I'm like, dumb, boring. Like, do something else, do something different. And so that's like a really hard thing, is that I like read. So behind me are my 2 shelves of witch books. And these are just the witch books I physically own. And I don't even know if this is all of them. Some of them might be at other places right now. I consume a lot of them.
Yes,
And
you do.
when you like dive deep into a genre, it can get boring if there's not enough like diversity of everything, anything. Like, so that's definitely somewhere where I struggle with it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because and we'll get into that in a little bit, but I know you've talked like magical realism in this sense is different than typical magical realism. This is kind of the like magic is in the world and only certain people know it, but it's around us. And then of course there's the low fantasy, there's the high fantasies, there's like the contemporary witchy fan like
Right.
there then there's the romantasy where it's like it's also that, but then there's also the contemporary witch romance. Like there's a lot to unpack in the space.
I will tell you, I get emails from publishers and like
Mhm.
the ones who I like take arcs from a lot. They'll be like, "Hey, Meara, here's a sapphic witch novel," and I'm like, "Yes, send, check,
Keywords met. Yeah.
let's go."
What do you think turns a genre from I enjoy this to it's a part of my personality now?
Oh, that's so interesting. That's a
Uh-huh.
great question.
Thank you.
I really think it's the genre where someone can just like say the keyword and you're like, done. Yes. Like that. I don't need to know any of the plot. I don't need to know any of the characters. You have piqued my interest. I'm in. Like, I think that's it.
What are some of those like some is I'm my brain went to like 12 different places with that answer because I love that answer of you can get away with the keywords because you know what you're buying into already. So for you, what is the baseline of anything witchy? You don't have to add any of the other subs to it. It doesn't have to include the like low high fantasy. Any of that is like aside. What do you personally expect? So if a publisher sends the keywords sapphic witches, what's your baseline? You know, or you come to expect like XYZ.
The characters have to like practice magic in some way, shape, or form, basically.
Okay.
And like, there's a few different books that I have on the shelf. Actually, one of my favorites. I don't know if it's here. I think I've lent it to someone. But we'll talk about it in a minute. Like the character herself doesn't like she's not like moving through the world being like I am a witch. She like
Mm,
accidentally experiences some magic and has to like kind of like cast a reversal spell. And I still consider that like a witchy book because there was still like we have to like move with intention and do this thing to have this magical result. And there's like some books that I consider like witch adjacent. Like I feel like One Dark Window is almost like witch adjacent because like none of them are witches, none of them are necessarily like magical practitioners, but there's these cards which are very like tarot card-esque and there's magic associated with them. So that
right.
still gave me the feeling of like a really great original witchy story.
I totally see that. That makes sense. So for you, it's just like to be a witchy book, it doesn't matter where it splinters from there.
Yeah,
It should have the dominance of a person actively practicing magic. Like
in some way.
there
Yeah.
is some sort of participation in a craft. Okay, I
Yes.
think that's helpful, and I think that also adds the layer of understanding, at least for me, of how you can then go, oh, because I know I do the same thing when it comes to horror. Horror is a big genre for me. So when they say something like a sapphic retelling of whatever, I'm usually like, oh, I'd love to see how the lesbians freak out in this one. You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. And I feel like, especially with like when you're like kind of like more the content of the book, like witchy or I like it's not so much a genre, it's more like a vibe or a content. It helps to be more broad than to be narrow because narrow gets really boring. And also like specifically with like witchy and fantasy things, it's like there's so many ways that people actually practice it in real
Mhm.
life and that it has occurred throughout history that there's like a lot of avenues you can take to incorporate it into your story. Like there's no one true way.
Right. There's no single one-way direct path to witchcraft. There's a dozen ways, and we want to see someone else's interpretation of all the different things we've collected over the years as readers.
Yeah, exactly.
What does witchy fiction give you that other genres don't? Is it about the magic itself? Is it the people who wield it? Or is it that like every book gives you something different and again you're just kind of addicted to the sensation?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of self-insert
Okay.
where it's just like, I want to be a witch. I want to have magic. I one of the things that like really just like gravitates me towards witches and witchcraft overall is it like is in concept like a balancing power for of gender.
Mhm.
It gives women this like additional strength, this additional power that makes them, while they seem like maybe meek and able to be overpowered, they have this like additional thing that's unexpected of them. I think it's like gender inequity that like really challenged me as a child. And that's where like a lot of my personality was born from. And I think witches are like a natural gravitation towards the concept of dealing with gender inequity. Um,
Absolutely.
I don't remember what this question was.
No, that's okay because I think that's such a better direction to go in. That like from a young age, the power imbalance spoke to you in a way that you were like, this is self-inserting was the only way at that time you could
Yeah.
like
Yes.
carry out not even revenge, but just like understanding and grappling with and hoping for something else.
And like it gives you like confidence. And so that's what it was. Is that like when I'm reading witchy books, a lot of times I'm like kind of self-inserting and I'm like imagining myself with these abilities, these powers, this connection to whatever magical element.
And you're trying to take something like you take something out of it with you, right? Like it
Yeah.
doesn't matter if it's the secret or society of irregular witches or like it doesn't matter which of the books on the shelves you pull out. There's always something you can kind of pull away from it or like take back with you. And a lot of times it tends to be that confidence and that power.
Exactly. Like one of my favorite characters in the Grishaverse is Bagra, who trains Alina. And I like her because she just like feels like a witchy old crone. And I like books where like a character has like a set power, like the chosen one, born with big power. Like that's cool and those are fun, but like that also gets repetitive. And there's like, oh, okay, I see like how this is gonna come into play or like what this is gonna do. I think witches, like there's like so much variety in what they can do
Right.
that it creates a little bit of like what's gonna happen. And there's just like more like almost like strategy and mental element to whatever the witches are doing.
There's a lot of interpersonal dynamics, it feels like, because a lot of times when there are like magically powered people, you could, I'm not saying the X-Men have magic powers, but like in that sense, there's superheroes with a bunch of different abilities. And a lot of times in witchy worlds, there will be practitioners with specific skill sets. And so you're going to someone for specific healing or like you're coming to someone for something else. So it's not just like an action power play. It is also like human dynamics and
Yeah.
learning how to communicate and dealing with drama, I guess.
Yes. Yes. Like, I don't know. It just feels less like all these chapters of someone like working out to flex a specific muscle.
Right. It's not Magneto lifting up a bunch of things over and over until he's stronger.
Yes, exactly.
And so thinking in that, because this kind of makes me think of a lot of the different flavors that we see in witchy books. Do you tend toward one specific thing? Like I'm thinking like they all kind of scratch a specific emotional itch. Sometimes it's comfort, sometimes it's power, sometimes it's rebellion, and I think a lot of time it's community. I think there's a lot of like found family in witch books, like or even returning to family you didn't know existed or you were ostracized from.
I love the coven concept. I'm like looking at my witch books now. A lot of them, like they have like a coven or like I love a discovery of power. I love when people don't know what they're capable of, or maybe that they don't even know they have this. I love
Yeah.
when they find out and it's like, oh shit.
Uh-huh.
Oh my God. Okay. Or someone has like suppressed power and now they have to like figure out how to get it out of them. I think a lot of it really comes back to this confidence aspect. I think it's really a metaphor for like self confidence and self discovery.
And it's interesting to think of how I don't know, like subconscious a lot of that tends to feel in the plot and in the pacing of many witchy books that
Yeah.
we're not hammering a message home. It's kind of like gentle empowerment throughout.
Yes. It's very much like the kinds of conflict are like protagonist versus outside force, protagonist versus inside force, like all that. And I feel like witch books are very often protagonist versus outside force, but it is only manageable through an internal journey.
Yes, have to balance all levels of self to like reach the next stage of the journey.
Yeah.
So let's look at subgenres for a second here. Are there specific ones you're drawn to? I know for you, we look at the shelf, it's all of it. So could you break down for the folks at home some of the subgenres and the ones that you kind of lean toward? Of course, I'm thinking like cozy witchy, dark academia, historical witchcraft, modern day, folklore, horror leaning.
I mean, you've said a lot. So I love fairy tale retellings.
Yes,
I dark academia. I think that academia witchcraft is always a fun time. Um, honestly, like don't put me in a dark academia setting if there's no magic. What's dark about it
agreed.
otherwise?
Agreed.
Unless you're
Uh,
ML Rio and it's If We Were Villains.
unless there is a secret society, like I
Yes.
will
Yeah.
take it as a thriller lean. The my
Yeah.
two way. If it's not magical, it has to be a thriller. If it's just like a dark school drama, keep it. I don't
No,
need it.
thank you.
But it's
No,
for
thank
someone else.
you.
Not hating,
Yeah.
but not for me.
I love a romance. I have like this shelf is a lot of witch romances. I love a horror witchy novel. Like there's just like that little like there's that like eeriness to it. Um I also love nonfiction. I love to learn about the real history of witches. Because there's just a lot of sexism and gender inequity in that. In this like characterization of what a witch is. I have some historical fiction. Um, God, there was another one that I was thinking that I know is in another part of my shelf, and I can't find it. Also, I'm sorry that I'm like talking away from my microphone right now.
You're
I'm
okay. We'll
looking
survive.
all over. God, I feel like basically what I like is I like my usual genres,
Okay. So your
and then
typical reads,
sprinkle
but making
some.
them magic.
Yeah, I feel like the only genre that I love to read that I'm not thinking of a single book where I've read magic is like dystopian, which
Yeah.
would be hard.
I mean, the only thing that comes to mind is Hell Followed With Us, and that's not specifically magical. There are just angels, and that's like a different, it's more like monster. It's monster than magic. So,
Right, like Pet is
yeah,
like
yeah,
but no one's like necessarily a witch. There's just again like
right.
powers and like magical elements.
Yes. No, I totally see that. So it makes sense with you saying just exactly like, I need the flavor of witchcraft. So you're already looking for what you love, the genres you're already gravitating towards. And then sometimes you go, okay, I need a witch fix. So right now I'm reading historical fiction. Give me a witchy historical fiction. Love that. If you were to just like set out into the witchy world, are you looking for high or low? Not necessarily you personally in the book which you wrote.
Um, God, I feel like it depends.
Okay.
I find it a lot. I find that I'm often more satisfied with a higher fantasy
Okay.
witch story because when the author gets to build their own entire world, they then get to make sure everything works and it's not tacky versus like low fantasy slash like contemporary. Like
Right.
I'm like, okay, well, that was tacky. Like
That makes
I didn't
sense.
like that. It's like there's just like a lot that they're trying to like fit in, and then everyone's kind of like having to follow the same rules, and it feels repetitive.
Right. And it's missing the author's originality perhaps, or they feel a little too constrained by
Yeah.
like predefined.
I will tell you my favorite author who does contemporary witchcraft. I've talked about her a lot on this podcast. It's Rachel Griffin, auto-buy author for me. So she has The Nature of Witches, Wild as the Witch, and Bring Me Your Midnight. The Nature of Witches and Wild as the Witch are both like very like magical realism, like very contemporary. The Nature of Witches is like witches are all of have an affinity with a specific season of the year. And it deals with the climate crisis. And so like the witches are having to like fight the climate crisis, but it also like impacts their magical abilities, which is
Oh,
very
love that.
original and a great
Yeah,
way to like tie in what real life looks like to witchcraft.
absolutely.
And Wild is the Witch. Um, God, I can't even remember like super specifically. I remember her like she lives in the Pacific Northwest and like I think her parents are naturalists. Like they like are some kind of environmentalist. Like there's an owl that they're like researching. It's been a long time since I've read that one. But again, it's like in a very real place and like very real people. It's almost kind of like Twilighty, where it's like, yeah, they
Got
live in
it.
this place and these magical elements
These
exist,
things
but
are
they also like,
happening to them where they're at, kind of thing.
but they're not like running a bakery.
Yes. Yes.
But
So
it's always a fucking bakery.
it's always because all the ingredients for baked goods are also magical goods.
I mean, you're right.
And I'm not hating on it because I will fuck up a cozy little nonsense like that. You give me a witchy cozy romance, I'm
Listen,
gonna be a happy camper.
I read
But it is
one.
always a bakery.
I read one that it was a bakery and it was a contemporary romance, small town. She has to move back to her family's small little town that she said she'd never go back to, brings her teenage daughter with her, running the bakery. And I'm like, this is so like every
So
other
Hallmark
book I've ever read.
coded. Yeah.
And then, Joe, the end of the book, like, brought in some, like, elements that I was like, this is one of the best this is one of the best things in a contemporary witch book I've ever read. But I was just so, like, bleh for, like, 85% of the book. And then I was listening to it in the car, and I was just, like, distraught. And everyone's like, "What's wrong?" And I was like, this is
I'm
suddenly
mad.
so
This was good.
This is so good. Like, I've never seen this before. Like, no one's ever done
Uh-huh.
it like this before. And I'm so, what? Like, I was gobsmacked and I was so upset. And I think that if I didn't read a ton of witch stories, I would have been blown away by this book. I think it was just because of the contemporary romance
Because of the trappings
consistency.
that it was, like,
Yes.
taking you through to get to a really good witchy story. Right.
I was like, this is,
Like,
God,
damn.
it's devastating.
The haterade was strong that day. But I'm with you, like, when it comes to reading, there is no time more than when I'm reading that I love to be wrong. I'm more than happy to go in a little skeptical, a little bit of a hater, and be proven so incredibly wrong. So, like, that's
Yes.
fun.
Yeah.
I know I
mean,
talk
like,
a lot about DNFing Fast and Furious, but I only ever do that when I get the sense of, like, I'm not gonna get through this, or it's gonna take me a week and a half and I'm gonna be mad.
yeah.
That's kind of the use case. When it's like, this is a little corny, if I'm not actively going like, "Ugh, this is bad,"
And I was doing a
I'm
reading
still going.
marathon. So I was
See?
like, I can't stop. Like, this is gonna be my 5th book. I have to hit
Yes.
my 5th book. Like, and it pushed me to find what I was like,
What
oh
you
my God,
really
this is
like.
one of the best like endings I've ever read in this genre. So
I
you
love
never
that.
know.
I love that. You just gotta try. Sometimes you gotta shake it out a little. And thinking of that, outside of like not really having found dystopian witchcraft, are there witchy subgenres that don't work for you?
Oh,
Or anything you kind of avoid? It doesn't have to
I
not work for you. It could just be that like, not my fave.
you know what? It's so funny. Like this is kind of the flip side of what I was saying earlier. I do think contemporary romance witch books are the ones that I'm most likely to be like, meh, but I clearly still buy them. Like you can
And
tell that
read them
these,
and enjoy
and
them.
yeah, like I'm still like, clearly still there.
Yeah,
Um, they just are more likely to be a disappointment,
that's that's fair.
but I'll do
Because
it anyway.
it doesn't fit your general genres, and a lot of your and all of your other witchy reading fits more of your genre reading.
I guess I like my witches to have more stakes.
And since your draw, as we've heard so far, is about like female empowerment, it's just about empowerment generally. Having the resolution be, I found happiness with a partner.
Yeah.
Like contemporary, it doesn't really matter who the other person in the relationship is. It's just kind of like, oh, this doesn't have the grip I'm looking for with my witches.
Yeah, exactly.
That's fair. I'm thinking like, I'm thinking of the very secret society of irregular witches. Like that's delightful because there were stakes. Like yes, the whole thing is a very much just a romance plot line, but you care what happens in the situation, which changes the grit factor to me. So
Yeah.
it's a balancing game.
And it's not so much just like, and there's evil forces and we have to defeat them. Like there's like a tangible
Yeah.
thing. Like I mentioned earlier that I was going to say one of my favorite witch stories, I'm just going to name drop it now, is This Spells Love by Kate Robb. It is a like accidental like universe shift. Like our main character like accidentally casts a spell basically where she goes into like an alternate version of the universe, and it's like a like second chance friends to lovers kind of thing, but she has to figure out how to get back into the correct timeline. And it's
Cute.
a very like practical magic-esque kind of witchcraft where it's not like double
It's
trouble, boil and
right.
bubble. It's like they make margaritas.
It's not in your face. It is in the background. It's working. It's the universe working more than.
Yeah, but it's like definitely still, I mean, it's literally called This Spells Love. Like,
And the cover is really cute. I
it's
just pulled it
really
up. It's like, oh,
cute.
that's cute.
And it's a really cute book.
Thinking of some of the tropes that we've talked about so far, um, are there any that will instantly make you pick up a book?
Oh, shoot. I mean, like, obviously, an adversaries to lovers is so much more intense when there is magic involved
Yeah.
because usually, like, they are somehow competing in that magic space, which I always think is very interesting. I love, I don't even think there's like a name for it, but I love the kind of magic where, like, the characters are like one is fulfilling or is like a power source or
Oh, sure.
like the magic is dependent upon them cooperating and doing something together.
Hmm.
I always really love those. Covens, like family dynamics. I tend to not like family dynamic stories.
Okay.
They feel like too like just contemporary fiction,
Yeah.
like just like plain lit fic. That's not for me, but I do love those. Queer stories obviously like parallel very fantastically with witchcraft. Um, so that's a good one. Um,
I love that you're looking at your books in your computer screen.
I'm trying to talk to the microphone,
Uh huh.
Not also like not necessarily a trope, but I
Yeah.
really, really love witchcraft stories that come from different cultures. So it's not just
Yes.
that like that like Celtic style witchcraft, but like Labyrinth Lost is a Latine witchcraft story. She's a bruja. And then like I would even say Legendborn is a witch story because she uses root magic.
Hmm.
And that is like Arthurian legend based, but also utilizes root, which is comes from African magic and is very prevalent in the like Southeast America, North America.
Hmm.
There's one I haven't read it yet, but it's on my to be read list and I can't find it. But it's the one, it's something steeped in tea. Maybe it's a magic steeped in poison is what I'm thinking
I
of.
think book two might have, yeah, the Book of Tea, book one. Okay. So I think it's a duology.
Yeah, okay. I haven't read those yet, but like I like that is like obviously like a different like cultural background for where the magic and like the witchiness comes from.
Yes. I love that because I know I'm always telling people to read lit in translation because it is such a brilliant perspective shift. Like, it's kind of like the first time you watch like a British show and you're just like, oh, this wasn't produced for the mass market. This was produced for our market. And so you get to see the like it's like being invited to someone's house for dinner and you see how they were raised. Like you see
Yeah,
what their styles were like. And I think I always say it with lit in translation because you get to see what drives a lot of the writing in different cultures because it's so different from how we approach writing here across all genres. And you just find new things you like. So even some of the things you may not love, you find different things that you go, but I won't get this anywhere else. And you kind of like balance and grow with it.
yeah, totally.
Let's see. I know we only have so much time in a day, but
I wish there was more.
me too. How do you usually find your witchy reads? Do you have a secret? Or are you just always looking at books?
I'm always looking at books. It is judging books by their covers.
Okay, I love that answer because it's true. That's how I find 90% of the books that I want to read. Like,
With witchy books, like there's just like an aesthetic style that like is pretty quickly communicated via the design on the covers. Usually it's some sparkles.
I love the world that we're in now where it really is just some sparkles now.
I'm like, oh, there's some sparkles. Is this a witchy book? And then I'll read back
Yes.
and I'm like, blah, blah, blah is a witch. And I'm like, done deal.
Done.
Yep.
Let's do a witchy lightning round.
Okay.
Cozy or dark?
Dark.
Standalone or long-running series?
Standalone.
Historical or modern day?
Historical.
Small town or secret society?
Secret Society.
Soft magic or heavy rules magic?
Oh.
Yeah, how involved is the magic system? Not
Oh,
very or
that's,
very?
I think very.
Okay. Found family or bloodline witches?
Found family.
Forest, sea, or kitchen witch?
Forest.
Grimoire or vibes only spellcasting?
Grimoire.
Uh-huh. Messy, chaotic, or calm?
Chaotic.
Magical realism or full fantasy?
Full fantasy.
Romance subplot, yes or no?
Yes.
Curses or blessings?
Curses.
Goth or cottagecore?
I want to say cottagecore, but I feel like
It goes against the one before.
goes against a bunch of stuff that I've already said.
But speak with your heart.
I think cottagecore.
Cottagecore, absolutely. Coven forming or coven falling apart?
Oh. Oh. Coven forming.
Uh-huh. And if you could put one witchy book into everyone's hands, what would it be?
Ah! Okay.
You're welcome.
Shit. Okay. This is really hard. I think it's got to be The Nature of Witches by Rachel Griffin.
Okay.
I think it's so original for this like subgenre. I think it's got a little bit of something for everyone. I think it's like culturally relevant because it talks about the climate crisis.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
And
I think it's got to be
it's a
that
favorite.
one.
It like you love it.
It's a favorite.
You return to it. Like it speaks to
And
you.
it's stunning. The first editions got printed with this cover.
Oh.
Can't be beat. But there's like other ones that I really love.
Well, we'll go out into some shout outs and recommendations. So, are there a handful that you always recommend when someone asks where to start?
Okay, actually, I am going to say When Wishes Bleed by Casey L. Bond. This is a book that was on my shelf for a really long time. And then one day I was like, I just need to like pick something up. And I was like, I bet I could read this pretty quickly. I read it in one sitting. It was phenomenal. If you love the kind of prince has to find his partner through a dating competition style, this is that. But the witch is like outside of the competition. She's not allowed into the world. Like witches are ostracized. And that was really good. I love Margaret Rogerson, which I don't know like how much her books count as witches, but just throwing that out there.
Sure.
Where is it? Sweet and Bitter Magic by Adrienne Tooley was one of my first like absolutely love this witch novels. These are, I call them my favorite little lesbians. It is just like, I think I've recommended this before as well. This Poison Heart by Kaylin Bayron is always a phenomenal one. And let me find like a like true like contemporary. Well, This Spells Love. It would be This Spells Love would be my like true contemporary romance witch recommendation. I know it was already put on the screen, but here's my copy.
Oh, so cute. Are there any under the radar, like backlist, debut, witchy reads that you wish more people talked about?
God, I feel like no one talks about the witchy reads that I like anyway. So like,
So you've already done it.
Yeah, I will say another book that I didn't recommend that like I don't really see come up is Extasia by Claire Legrand. And people really like Claire Legrand, and this book isn't new or anything. But
I was going to say, I definitely know who Claire Legrand is. I am surprised to have never heard of it.
Honestly, you know that song that's going pretty viral that's from The Testament of Anne Lee?
Yes.
Like shaker, them dancing. This book feels like that. So if you're
Okay.
looking for that in book form, I would try Extasia.
Love that. Any other books you need to shout out? Let them off your spirit.
Oh, Lovely, Dark, and Deep by Elisa A. Bonin. This is a dark academia witchcraft one where everyone has a different style of power. And also is an immigration story. Let's see. The Weight of Blood by Tiffany D. Jackson is technically a witch story and phenomenal. I have all of my witch things. Oh, The Wedding Witch, which I've talked about a few times on this podcast. I obviously really love. Nettle and Bone by T. Kingfisher is a fantastic witch story. It's just a fairy tale retelling, but I really loved the witch character in that. And specifically the audiobook. That's phenomenal. There's so many that I could say, but I think I'll leave it at that.
And that's fair. You've given us so much to run from. And of course, listeners, remember, all of the titles are linked in the description, so you can find them on Libby. You can use that as a reference for anywhere online that you do your book in. So many great things ready for you. Meara, thank you for joining me today and sharing your witchy journey.
Thank you so much for finally letting me talk about this.
You ask, I eventually answer.
You've let me talk about it in other topics, but I'm glad to finally give it its true flowers.
She got her time in the sun today. The witch is happy. But y'all, thank you for being here. And please consider liking, commenting, subscribing, following, rating the show on your podcast platform, yada, yada, yada. Have a great day. Thank you so much for joining us, and happy reading. You can sample and borrow the books from today's episode in the Libby app, or if you're a librarian, find them for purchase in Overdrive Marketplace. Book Lounge by Libby is a proud Evergreen Podcast signature program. Explore more amazing shows at evergreenpodcasts.com. This podcast is produced and recorded by me, Joe Skelly, with editing by Andrew Alonso. Our theme music is High Five by Rex Banner, used with permission. Book Lounge by Libby is presented by the Libby app. Learn more at libbylife.com/booklounge.